Welcome back into Heating Up, episode 17. We're going back to back. Alex Maston here with you. If you haven't gotten a chance, go back and listen to yesterday's Alabama season recap with Drew Norris and I. We got in and we kind of wanted to name it what's going right, what's going wrong, that sort of thing, because I think there are a lot of question marks about what's going on with Alabama season. Why the roller coaster, why the ups and downs and the preseason expectations and where they met. And it was kind of interesting to go back and look at some of the preseason stuff because I feel like we think about that all the time and then we don't think about it all and it kind of goes away. So I want to do something kind of similar with Auburn. And I thought who better than my buddy TJ Vines to jump in here with me. TJ, I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Oh yeah, man. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk some Auburn basketball.
So we're sitting here. This is Heating Up episode 17, 2022 Auburn basketball. And I titled this The Year of the Impact Newcomer. Whether we're talking about the transfers that came in, or we're talking about Jabari Smith and that freshman group. Well, I guess it was just Jabari Smith. He's the only freshman on the roster, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
And just kind of, going and looking over that and how does that play into expectations? How do you kind of rate and review when guys are playing at smaller colleges and some of the average fan doesn't know about it, and how much do you take from freshmen, and we'll go back and talk about what we did with Alabama and JD Davison and what Auburn and Jabari. It's just kind of interesting. And so I thought the year of the impact newcomer would be kind of the focus here on this Auburn podcast. And I want to start with kind of what I did with the Alabama. I thought this was an interesting way to look at it. I really like the Athlon stuff. I've been using the Athlon magazine for years and years and years to do my preseason research, whether I'm just a fan or somebody involved in the coaching staff or whatever. And I like it because they break down different categories and stuff. So TJ, let me run through some of this and tell me if it kind of lines up with what you remember back in the spring and the summer and early fall of what Auburn's expectations were. So the Athlon magazine had Auburn as the 25th ranked team in the country. That was fifth in the SEC. They predicted Auburn to be a 7 seed. And so lose in the second round. They don't predict upsets. So lose in the second round as a 7 seed to 2 seed Baylor. Just something interesting there. Top 100 players, they go in and they rate everybody from freshmen to returning seniors or just their impact on the game of basketball, basically. And the highest ranked player was Jabari Smith at 32. And I mentioned this in yesterday's with Drew because they actually had Javon Quinterly higher ranked than Jabari Smith coming into the season. So I've been a little down on Quinterly just because I had those kind of expectations for him. So Jabari at 32, Walker Kessler at 44, and Alan Flanagan at 69. So 3 Auburn players, all our front court, the big wing to the big guy, all ranked in the top 69 in the country. That's as high as I've seen Walker Kessler, really. That was pretty high comparatively. I think that was higher than Shackelford, for example. He was like 53 or something in the country. So let's start there with Auburn at 25 and 5th in the SEC, 7 seed in the tournament, and then those top 100 players. Is that kind of the feeling you had going into the season about this Auburn basketball team?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. Honestly, it could have been even worse just because all of the newcomers. I mean, you got Katie Johnson coming from Georgia, Walker Kessler coming from North Carolina. Best player supposed to be Jabari Smith. He's a freshman, so you never really know how that's going to pan out. It's just and then you have Zeb Jasper as well. So there's just so many new pieces. There's no way to tell how they're going to gel together, how long it's going to take. And then you have Alan Flanagan, our best returning player. He gets hurt with an Achilles injury, preseason. So he misses the first 2 or 3 months of basketball. So there's so many unknowns. So like I said, it could have been worse, but I think that's fair. As we can see now that we've kind of exceeded those expectations, and that's good. And credit to Bruce. And I would say, I think they get more time to practice in the preseason now than they have before, and so I think that was a huge part in these guys gelling and developing, and going from being acquaintances to friends to now brothers, as Bruce said earlier today. So I just think all that goes into where we are now.
A couple more categories they had. One thing that's interesting, I didn't write these down, but they broke down like top 10 shooters in the country, top 10 rim protectors in the country, top 10 on-ball defenders in the country, top 10 offensive rebounders. I think those are the categories. Nobody from Auburn on any of those lists. So you think about how good Walker Kessler is at blocking shots. you think about how Jabari Smith can shoot the basketball, nobody listed on those top 10s. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They did a top 15 impact freshman, and Jabari Smith was 8. He's a freshman of the year in the SEC. I mean, right there, if not the best freshman in the top 3, but he was 8th on the list. So just kind of give you an idea of, even though he was a top 5 recruit on most lists, he wasn't just an automatic, everybody was in love with him, that sort of thing. I think some people saw a little bit more of a project where he, was thin. They didn't know if he was an elite 3-point shooter, like Bruce talks about. He didn't know that. They didn't know if he could put it on the ground, that sort of thing. And then the other category, they did 15 transfers to watch, and Walker Kessler was number 4 on that list. So no Katie Johnson, no Wendell Green, no Zep Jasper. Justin Powell was actually number 15, I believe, on the list. So that just kind of just tells you a little bit about those categories. And they also did their all SEC teams, and they gave Jabari first team, Walker Kessler second team, and Alan Flanagan third team. So in a way, this Athlon magazine was kind of high on some of our guys. Maybe not our team in general, but high on some of our guys. Anything jump out to you about any of those categories or rankings?
I'm a little surprised about Jabari being first team on there, just because I think the official SEC preseason, they had him at second team, and they had Oscar Sheboy from Kentucky, at second team as well. So, and those
Correct.
two,
Second team for Jabari, and nobody else listed, I believe, in the official preseason all SEC stuff.
yeah. So I guess credit to Athlon for getting that right. But yeah, a little surprising that they had actually put him there, just because they, a newcomer, you never really know how it's going to pan out. So I guess they saw something in him that maybe some of the other national media pundits didn't see.
Yeah, I can see that. And then I just kind of want to break down, because really we're looking at some bracket stuff. And earlier in the year, we kept going on Lenardi's bracket. And I've been kind of reading more into bracketology type stuff. And a lot of people hate on Lenardi a little bit and say, hey, he just has the platform, but he's not the most accurate. So I started using bracketmatrix.com. And that's where they take like 100 and something of everybody's brackets and put them together and that sort of thing. So that was kind of my concept looking at this preseason poll as well. So here are some of the other going into this season. Most of these were done late summer, early August, when kind of the transfer portal stuff was done. Auburn was 22nd in the AP poll in the preseason. Jeff Goodman does his top 25. Auburn not in his top 25. Andy Katz does a top 36. He calls them the 36 power rankings. He does them like throughout the season. Preseason, Auburn was 30th. Blue Ribbon is a long running website, magazine, book. They had Auburn 22nd. Ken Palm, the analytics site, had Auburn 28th. Dickie V does the top 40 every year at the end of the summer, early fall. He had Auburn 21st. And then the highest of the group, our guy, John Rothstein, who loves Bruce, had Auburn 13th. So that was the high note there. Anything jump out to you about Rothstein having Auburn up high? Maybe Goodwin not in the list. Katz not too high on Auburn either at 30?
Yeah, not too surprising on Goodman, I think. Yeah, I guess Auburn's reputation of not really being a basketball program kind of gets his a bias towards Auburn, and so that makes sense. But John, him and Bruce, really good friends. So I imagine Bruce is probably giving him inside information about what he has and how he's feeling about the team, and I'm sure John probably trusts the insight. Bruce is a straightforward guy, so he's not going to tell something that isn't true. So I'd imagine that information kind of played into his ranking. But that's credit to him for having us that high. Just because like I said, there's so many newcomers. There's no way to know how good they were going to be, and so just everything was just so much unknown. So credit to John for having us that high.
And as much as we don't want to talk about it, we're 13 and 14 last year. I know a lot of stuff happened after we banned ourselves or whatever from the tournament, and Sharif Cooper missing games. But say what you will, we still were an under 500 team and looked sloppy at times and didn't look like a great squad. So I get some of these people and where they had us, but I have a lot of faith in Bruce Pearl. So I thought, Walker Kessler was a no-brainer. We were recruiting him as a 5-star before. It wasn't like he was a guy we'd never heard of. Katie Johnson, we knew a little bit about. We'd seen him play. We knew he'd make some kind of impact on this game. Tell me about your personal feelings going into this season. What were some of your expectations? You're reading about the transfers, you're reading about recruits, you're reading the early practice notes, late summer, early fall. What were your personal expectations of this team?
Yeah, personally, I felt like this team could be good. We had, the potential. Even I think even Bruce said that, preseason that it could be a Final Four team if everything, comes together. And so it's just kind of watching it all play out and if it was actually going to come together. But we'd seen Katie Johnson at Georgia, and so we I mean, his best games were against Auburn, I believe. Like he's putting up 20 points in both contests. So we knew that he could be a good player. I didn't know much about Wendell, but just from his highlights, you can tell that he had a vision. He was a good playmaker, and as a freshman, he had so much confidence. So I thought that would bode well for us, just because Bruce is going to give you, he's going to instill confidence in you if you don't have confidence. So that was a good to see. I knew Zepp was going to be a good defender, and so the defense was going to be there for us. And then Walker Kessler being the shot blocker that he was, and the idea of finally playing big with 6'10" power forward and having a 7-foot center, I thought that would be intriguing. And so I thought we had a chance. It's just going to be a matter of the guys gelling, getting chemistry, and then how fast we could do it, and ultimately like what kind of playing style we'd play with in order to see how good we could actually become. But I felt good. I'm not sure if I felt this good. Number one team in the country at one point. Final Four, legitimate Final Four contenders. But it's credit to Bruce and his staff of putting a good game plan together, getting the guys to love each other, playing for each other. I mean, it just goes to show you what kind of coach he is, and just guys buying in. So good to see.
I think I was probably along those lines with you. Kind of like what you were saying, knowing a little bit about the guys coming in. I'd watched a bunch of YouTube of Jabari Smith. I felt really good about him being a KD type guy, can shoot the basketball and just be an offensive force. I didn't know a ton about Walker Kessler, but I knew that we really wanted him out of high school. And I knew he was a big dude, and I felt like that was a pretty good sign. And of course, I went back to some of those games late in the season for North Carolina. He played really well. And so I was excited about that. I was excited about the depth because I had a lot of faith in Alan Flanagan and Devin Cambridge and Jalen Williams and those guys who played a lot of minutes last year, and they decided to come back. I thought that said a lot about the program in general, that those guys didn't want to run from it and we're okay with that. My big question was obviously guard play. And as bad as Auburn looked when Sharif Cooper was not on the floor last year was kind of scary to me. The year before that, Javon McCormick was this nobody recruit that signed up, ended up being a good backup point guard, and then a pretty dang good starting point guard. And we had no backup point guard after that. Samir Dowdy ended up having to play a bunch of backup point guard minutes. So it was just like a couple years of very shaky point guard situations, whether it be depth or your starter. And honestly, I just think Bruce plays through his point guard, that he loves the high ball screen. He loves to put the ball in his hands and let him make decisions. So that was something that scared me a little bit, not knowing enough about Zep Jasper and Wendell Green. That's the only thing that was kind of like, I wanted to wait and see it a little bit, but I had faith in these guys that they were going to come through. What are your thoughts? So on the last episode with Drew last night, we talked about the fact that a lot of people were saying when Alabama lost some of those veteran guys that weren't recruited by Nate Oates, that this year's team would be closer to a Nate Oates team, guys that he picked out, guys that played his style, that sort of thing. Well, in a way, that hasn't worked out well for him, right? The guys that they lost end up being guys that are really helpful and guys that they really miss. What are your thoughts on some Auburn and some Bruce Pearl changes? It seems like he's wanted to get bigger at times. And you said that going into this year, and that did happen, and Auburn has gotten bigger. But at the guard spot, it seems like he has wanted that quicker, smaller guard again after going away from that from like a recruiting class or two. Do you think that it was just the transfers just happened to be that style of player in Zep and Wendell and KD? Or do you think Bruce Pearl may have seen some kind of that he didn't like what was going on with his roster and he wanted to get back to a certain style of play?
It's a good question. For me, I'm thinking Bruce is probably going after the best player available. And if that guy is 5'10", 5'9", like he doesn't care at all. Like that's not gonna affect his decision. But if the guy's 6'5" and he's the best player available, he's gonna go after that guy too. So I just think whoever's out there, whoever wants to come to Auburn, if he sees that they're good enough to play for him and he thinks that they'll be a good fit in the system, he's gonna go after those guys. And just to credit to them, like I said, he doesn't care if they're small, big. I think just going off the best player available is what it seems like to me.
I can see that, but I do think like and the other guy that Auburn was going after, and then it didn't work out was Desi Seals, and he was that same style player, that small, just kind of get after you a little bit guy.
Yeah.
But I think I'm unsure about that, but I think that may have more to do with those guys seeing in Auburn, seeing that success with guys that were like them. If you go back and read recruiting articles, they always say that. Every time we're recruiting a small guard, they say, well, I looked, and Wendell Green says this in some articles. I looked, and Auburn and Bruce Pearl have had success with smaller guards. And so that drew me to them. So maybe there's a chance where those guys are drawn more to Auburn than it is Auburn really trying to go get that kind of player.
Yeah, I could see that too, and I'd also be curious how many other coaches are take a chance on those small guards the way Bruce Pearl does. So, is Auburn the biggest school that's going to go after somebody? Take a chance on those guys. I'd be curious to know what kind of how that plays into decision making as well.
Yeah, I would be curious too, because if you go back and look on a couple guys that Auburn has missed on, whether it be a JD Davison, a bigger guard, a Ty Washington, a little bit of a longer, bigger guard. But at the same time, there are some other teams having success. One of the best players I've seen Auburn play all year is Zakai Ziegler from Tennessee. That guy was an animal out there, and he's small.
Yeah,
Severe Wheeler has made a huge impact at Georgia. He's a small guy. I think
yeah.
I'm team small guard. I like those little guys with a chip on their shoulder playing hard.
That's what Bruce says, right? Small and quick, the big and slow. He loves it.
Yeah, he does say that, doesn't he? Okay, so that was just kind of taking us back to just think about how we felt at the beginning of the year and a little bit of how we feel now compared to some of that. But I want to jump into the little bit of a player analysis piece because we did this for Alabama last night because I was doing what was working, what was not. I was talking about Shackford working out a little bit and comparing his numbers last year to this year. Then I was looking at Quinterly and they didn't, and some of their role guys that have had a bigger opportunity, whether it be a Gary, a Miles, how did that work out year after year? And then the big one that jumped out of me, and this is why I wanted to do it for Auburn, is I was looking at Noah Gurley's stats at Furman and then comparing them to at Alabama, and it was an eye opener on some of the stuff. And yes, the minutes played were way down, but he was like a completely different player. Like his 2-point field goal percentage was up at Alabama. His 3-point field goal percentage was way down from Furman. This dude was a different player. Like he's averaging like less than 1 assist a game at Alabama. He was averaging like 2.5 or 2.7 at Furman. So that just kind of made me think, let's look at these Auburn guys. If this is going to be the year of the newcomer, let's look at these 4 major transfers and let's compare a little bit from what they did last year to what they did this year. And I'm going to kind of get you to give me some thoughts on, are you surprised by that? What are some areas that you understand why they might be better at Auburn or why they might have been better at the other level or the other school? So let's start with Walker Kessler because that's the big one. And his numbers are kind of skewed because he didn't get on the court a lot at the beginning of the year at all. And then it was like once he got on the court, he actually played well. So his numbers in a way aren't that bad per game, but the totality, he just didn't get enough of an opportunity. So let's look at Walker Kessler. Start with minutes per game. He's plus 17 minutes per game. He was like at 9 minutes a game or so at Carolina. So he's up. He is 17 minutes per game more at Auburn. Field goal percentage, he's up 5%. Free throw percentage, he's up 7%. Rebounds per game, he's up 5 rebounds a game. He's up about 0.6 assists a game. So he wasn't a massive passer at Carolina. He hadn't been a huge passer assist guy at Auburn. Steals a game, he's up about 0.6 steals a game. Blocks is the big one, though. He's up 3.6 blocks. He was averaging like 0.9. He's basically averaging 1 block a game. He was in there for 9 minutes. He's getting basically 66% more minutes than that. And he's averaging that many more blocks every single night. Points per game up 4.4 to 11.5. What's your reaction to hearing some of those Walker Kessler numbers?
That makes sense to me. Not only with the more playing time, you also, as you get more playing time, you're able to develop your game and you actually, find your strengths, find your weaknesses. And I think it actually gives you a chance to actually develop and get better during that time. And so coming to Auburn and now playing maybe 25, 30 minutes a game, it's just, I guess, giving him more confidence, making him understand like what he's good at, what he's not so good at, sticking to his strengths, trying to hide his weaknesses. And so that makes sense to me. I mean, honestly, if he didn't have Dylan Cardwell, who's, really talented center, he'd probably get more minutes at another school and even having more opportunities. So it's really impressive. Credit to him, but I mean, you can see the talent. He's a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. So you knew it was there, just a matter of giving him those opportunities. I'm not sure if North Carolina, being a blue blood, they might have had some other 5-star recruits ahead of him. I'm not sure what the situation actually was.
Well, they had Armando Baycott, who's been really, really good this season. So I think that's interesting. And I don't know that didn't help Kessler playing to get somebody like that every day.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I honestly, I wonder if he saw the writing on the wall, if that was going to, impact his playing time. He wanted a bigger role, and he felt like he probably deserved a better role. And so, obviously, the way he's playing for us, it makes sense if that was his thought process. So, I'm not surprised, but definitely credit to him. Putting in the work and just getting better over time, just gradually increasing his game.
I'm happy for Walker. I'm just really happy for him that he gets to come here. His brother lives in town or whatever. His family comes over for every game. It was a tough COVID year at North Carolina. I was reading an article like they put them up in hotels last year at North Carolina. And so Walker Kessler, unless he was at basketball practice, was in a hotel room for the entire season. Like the classes were online, like just totally isolated. So I do wonder. I think we'll probably have a ton of transfer portal stuff this year, but I wonder if it's not a little bit different. Just last year was just so weird for some of these guys, and off the court, I think they wanted to change their situations a little bit. But obviously, massive win for Walker Kessler. That's the biggest win you can go tell about a transfer situation. Let's jump to KD Johnson. He was kind of an interesting story. KD is playing 5 minutes per game more, and he played about half a season. He played 16 games at Georgia because there were some questions about his eligibility or something at the beginning of the year. So KD's at 5 minutes a game. His field goal percentage is down 2 points, pretty close. His 3-point percentage is down 8 points. He's basically making the same amount. It's like 3 a game or something, but he's taking more at Auburn. He shot 39% from the 3-point line at Georgia.
Wow.
So he's not a poor 3-point shooter this year, but he's kind of league average. And man, he really shot it well last year. This is kind of interesting to me. He's been a decent free throw shooter this year for Auburn. He's 10% higher than he was at Georgia. He was a bad free throw shooter at Georgia. And somebody who got to the line as much as he was, that tells me some issues that Georgia was having. Yeah. Rebounds, steals, assists, they're all basically the same. He was the same player at Georgia as he is at Auburn. Points per game are down just a little bit. 13.5 points per game last year at Georgia, 12.7 this year at Auburn. Talk to me about KD.
Yeah, no, KD seems like one of those guys that if you let him roam free and do his thing, then he can make some stuff happen. And I feel like Bruce Pearl's that kind of coach. He's going to give you the confidence. I think Bruce Pearl's main thing, as long as you play defense, offense, he'll give you some leeway. And it's shown that KD's a really good defender and he's dedicated to that side of the basketball. So I think, with that being said, Bruce lets the guys play free, and I think KD just kind of thrives in that environment. And I think that's probably plays a large impact on the success that he's having. But surprising on the 3-point shooting. I'd be curious if the plays that Georgia were running are different, maybe like a different playing style. Because a lot of times KD, I love him to death, but he likes to do that little dribble pullback, step back 3. When I wish a lot of times he would just catch and shoot. I think that would probably improve his percentages. So I wonder if maybe Georgia's playing style maybe gave him more catch and shoot 3s, and maybe that was why he's more consistent. But no, I've been impressed with KD. He's definitely been better than I expected. I love how we can give him the ball in the clutch, and he's not going to be afraid. He's going to make the play. He thinks he's the best player on the court, and it's sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But you live and die with it just because of how hard he plays and how much he cares and how much passion he plays with.
What are your thoughts on his growth from when you saw him game 1 and thinking a little bit about his Georgia time, but really game 1 at Auburn to now? Because I think we're underestimating how young of a player he is. He's only a sophomore, a true sophomore, only played in 16 games last year. You talk about freshmen and their struggles. Well, KD's a young player also. What have you thought about his growth from game 1 to game 32 or whatever we're at now?
I would say more so than anything for me. So when I first saw him play, I was like, man, this kid's a hothead. Like he's gonna get kicked out of the head. Like him and Bruce. I think him and Bruce were butting heads at the beginning of the season. Like I think they were actually really having issues getting on the same page. And I just think just more so than the actual on the court performance, more so just kind of like mentally, I've seen more maturity. He's, I guess, accepting coaching better. And I think Bruce maybe has figured out how to coach him better, like as far as being on the same page, like what makes him tick, what doesn't make him tick. And so I've been impressed with that more than anything. Just he seems like to be, I mean, he's still, very passionate, but as far as, I guess, passionate in a bad way, he seems to have chilled out, and he's actually becoming more and more mature as a as a basketball player. So that's
Let's move on to Wayne Green. Wayne Green's a guy coming from Eastern Kentucky where he was their starting point guard as a freshman, a good team. I think they went 22-7. I remember a guy who works with me at our Fox Sports station down in Gadsden, big JSU guy, went to every JSU game last year as a student. He talked about they play in the conference with him. He's like, you're going to love this kid. He was great against Jacksonville. He pulls from anywhere on the court. He kind of gave me some feedback there, and I knew right off the bat after I heard that somebody that watched him play in person that he sounded like somebody Bruce would really like. But let's jump into his stats a little bit. So he's 4 minutes per game less. He was around that 30 mark at EKU, and he's down a little bit at Auburn, obviously with more options there at point guard. He's 3% down in field goal percentage. He's 6% down in 3-point field goal percentage. He's +7 in free throw shooting. Rebounds, steals, assists, all about the same. He's all about the same. He rebounds the ball pretty well for a guard. He did that at EKU. He does that at Auburn. He's at about 5 assists a game. Same thing, both sides. Turnovers, he's about half a turnover better at Auburn. And then points per game went from about 15.8 points per game at EKU to 12 at Auburn. Kind of initial thoughts on Wayne Green, when you saw him and what you thought of him the first few times and kind of what he's turned into here as an Auburn Tiger.
Yeah, no, I love Wendell. I imagine some of the numbers might be down just because he probably was the best player on his team at Western Kentucky, right? Or
Eastern.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm sure he was the best player on his team. He had had the ball in his hand for the majority of the game, making all the plays and everything. Whereas on this team, you got Jabari, you got KD, you got other guys that can share the load. And so, but for him to still have 12 says a lot about how good he is. But Wendell's one of those guys, man. Like I'm very impressed. I'm on the record saying that in 2 years, I think he could possibly be better than Jared Harper was his junior year at Auburn. I think that's saying a lot. Just as he gets more experience and just more confidence and just better understanding the system, I just can't see a point guard playing with more confidence than him at that point in his career. But yeah, he's super talented. I love his confidence. He seems to be very poised. Bruce has spoke to that in a few games that we've had this season where at the end of the game, you get the ball to Wendell and he's going to make something happen, just kind of like similar to KD. And so he's not afraid. And that's, good having a point guard. Seems like a very cerebral point guard too. Seems to make the right decision. And so, no, I'm really impressed with Wendell. As far as expectations on him coming in, didn't really know what to think. Like I said, just from seeing the highlights on YouTube, I could tell he was making some, really good plays, but you never really know until he gets here. I've heard, the practice rumors of, the coaches thought he was better than they thought he was going to be. So that was good. So, but no, I've been super impressed, and I'm glad he's on our team.
Along the lines of the transfer portal, let me ask you this, because again, Wynn's only a sophomore, true sophomore. I think people forget some of these guys because they transferred in. They're not grad transfer type guys. So what are your thoughts on the difference in player development for a guy? So you're a Tyrell Jones, Turbo Jones, and you say you're a Wayne Green, and Wynn goes to Eastern Kentucky and wins the starting point guard job and plays all year long 30 minutes a game at point guard, or your Turbo, and you come in, you're a higher ranked recruit than Wynn, and you sit the bench at Auburn and you don't really get in the mix or whatever. And, so I'm curious, do you think there will be more people that the best path for player development is to go play at a smaller college than to come in and be a depth piece at a bigger college? And then maybe that's an opportunity to show out and then go somewhere ever you want to go. Do you think that'll have any impact on player development or people's decisions when they're a recruit? I mean, are you willing to go take the Eastern Kentucky offer instead of the Auburn offer? Or do you just feel so confident in yourself at that point that you think, when I get to Auburn, I'm going to win the job, no matter what?
Yeah. I guess it might be case by case with each player, depending on how highly recruit or how good you're supposed to be. So I would say someone that's a high recruit, and they feel like they can go anywhere in the country, then they're probably going to go to the school where they feel like they're going to get the most playing time. Whereas someone that's really good, but they've been kind of slept on and not getting the high majors, in a school like Auburn comes calling, then I think it'd be kind of like a no-brainer for them to come to Auburn. So I think it's just going to be a case by case scenario, but it's definitely interesting because I think it's going to be just a new chaotic time in basketball. I think it's going to help Auburn a lot just because I feel like, we like those underdog type recruits and the Wendell Greens, like those type of players. That's what Bruce says. Those 3-star, 4-star players, what we build our program off of. And so when you can look at a small school and see a player dominating, a competition, and you reach out to that player, it's like, hey, you can get more exposure at Auburn, come play for us. Like, I think it's going to be a no-brainer for those kids to transfer to Auburn. So I think it's definitely going to help us in the long run for sure.
Yeah, I just think about the player development side of it, though, and I think you're right on the recruiting. I don't think anybody's going to make that decision to go that other school, the smaller school, for that. But I mean, I just think about it and like, Dylan Cardwell. What if Dylan Cardwell would have gone to College of Charleston instead of Auburn and just had a really good year starting? Would that have been better for his player development than to play behind a couple guys at Auburn for a couple of years? Or you go back to a Bryce Brown, a guy that we offered kind of late in the process that was committed to Charlotte, I think something like that. Was it good for Bryce to have to earn his playing time? He played behind some guys as a freshman, started getting really into the mix a little bit as a sophomore, and then obviously was all the time starter by his junior year. Was it better for his player development to do that kind of thing, or would it have been better for him to go be a star somewhere for a couple of years?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I'm not sure if the recruits will think this way, but like for Dylan Cardwell, I think it's a no-brainer. Coming to Auburn was best for his player development, just because I think competition kind of brings out the best in you. So being able to play, behind a Walker Kessler for this long, and going against him in practice, you're not going to play a better center in college basketball than him. So if you can compete against him and play against him, then you can go anywhere and play and be a star. So I think for him, and after this season, I mean, if Walker goes to the NBA and we don't have a backup, I mean, I'm not sure if we're recruiting another center. I mean, Dill's either going to be the man, or if he wants to go transfer somewhere else, he could easily be, starting center in college basketball. So I think if I was advising a recruit, I would say, yeah, man, go to a big school, learn how to work, because the facilities are going to be top notch. Take advantage of those facilities for your, first 2 or 3 years, and then become the best player you can be. So then whenever you transfer to Oscar Sheway, he transferred in and now he's the player of the year at Kentucky. So the sky's the limit, if you just kind of be patient with it and get developed, and then, maybe transfer to a bigger school.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's an interesting topic because if you stay on that Kentucky for just a minute, I know we're kind of breaking away, but I just think it's a good basketball topic. Kellen Grady, plays 4 years at Davidson, is a great scorer and transfers to Kentucky, and it has kind of, he hasn't been perfect every game, but he's been a really successful player. If he comes in at Kentucky and he's behind some 5-star recruit, I don't know if he ever even sees the floor for a couple of years. Does his career change? Does he never have that success at Kentucky and he thinks he has to leave and go somewhere else to have that success?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a real good point. I don't know. I'm not sure the answer to that question. It's definitely an interesting one. I guess we just have to see how it plays out. But yeah. Because that's 2 different scenarios. I mean, going from a smaller school to a big school, as opposed to going from a big school to a smaller school. So yeah, maybe Dylan Cardwell would have been just fine dominating for the first 3 or 4 years at a small school, and then coming to Auburn and being like the backup center. Who knows? I think. Yeah. I mean, as long as, I guess it's an individual based. I mean, if you're willing to work, and you're gonna
right,
or wherever school you're at, then probably wouldn't matter that much. But if you're somebody, I
agree.
If you're somebody that needs to be pushed, then maybe going to a bigger school would help, just because those coaches are going to push you there, and it's a lot more serious at a bigger school than it would be at a smaller school.
I think that's fair enough. Steph Curry would have Davidson. I think he would have been great at any school he went to. I don't think that mattered at all. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I just think it's an interesting topic. And then one more, and if you had to do what's gone right, what's gone wrong with Auburn, I wouldn't put Zep Jasper in the what's gone wrong, but statistically, if you didn't know much about the game and you wanted to dig into the stats and look at what he did at College of Charleston, what he's doing at Auburn, you'd say, did he put himself in a bad situation? What's going on here? Let's look at his stats real quick. College of Charleston compared to Auburn. He played 3 years at College of Charleston. These are pretty steady numbers. I'm going off his last year, but pretty much as soon as he got there, I think he may have had some kind of red shirt or something going on at the very beginning where he missed a little time. But once he got in the mix, he played every single year. He was their main guy. I don't think he was their main point guard, but he was a guard on their team. Zeppa is playing basically 10 less minutes a game at Auburn than he did at College of Charleston, 9.6. His field goal percentage has dropped to 8 points. his 2-point field goal percentage has dropped 19 points from College of Charleston to Auburn. He was like a 51% 2-point field goal guy at Charleston. He has not been that at Auburn. His free throw percentage has gone down 10%. His 3-point field goal percentage has actually gone up 5%, but he was shooting a lot more at College of Charleston than he is Auburn. Right now, he's like 1 make a game pretty much at Auburn, and he was at like 3 makes a game basically at College of Charleston. His rebounds are down 2.4 rebounds. He's only 0.4 assists down. That tells you a little bit about he's playing more guard and more of that facilitator role at Auburn than he was at College of Charleston. His steals and blocks are about the same at College of Charleston at Auburn, and he's half a turnover better. He didn't turn over much at Charleston, and now he basically never turns it over. Overall points per game, he was a 15.6 points per game at Charleston, 5.0 at Auburn. Talk to me about Zep Jasper a little bit.
I think he might be another situation kind of like Wendell where, he was the guy and they ran their offense through him. And so he's making all the plays, scoring all the points like they needed. So that's what they needed from him in order to win basketball games. Whereas at Auburn, like I said, you have the Jabari Smith, Walker Kesslers, Katie Johnson, Wendell. So it's not necessarily needed as much. And I think Bruce even says that, I think Zep is just trying to kind of fit in, play his role. And I think Bruce has even said that he had to have a conversation with Zep to score. I mean, I think it's evident that he's capable of scoring if he wants to. And so it's just a matter of him being more aggressive. And I think if that's what I think we're seeing in these last few games, that he's kind of turning it up a little bit. He's starting to take more shots, shoot more threes. And I think that's just a credit to Bruce sitting him down like, hey man, we're going to need you to score. Cause he probably felt like that wasn't his role. And so he wasn't shooting that much. And since Bruce has kind of pushed him a little bit, I think we'll see more of Zep scoring. I think Auburn will be better for it.
I mean, I think it's pretty telling just watching the 2 games he missed while he was sick, how much of a struggle a lot of stuff on the court was for Auburn. But I'm with you. I think from Auburn's point of view, then this is a great situation to get somebody that is capable of doing those kind of things. And he's buying into a role that's not a glamorous role, but if you need it, that might be in him. That's as good of a situation for Auburn that you can get. But what about for Zep? I mean, it depends on what your overall goal is, maybe. If you're trying to get noticed in some way and make it to the pros, or like people always say, when your team wins, you're going to get recognition and awards and chances anyway. Auburn winning is good for Zep Jasper. He's going to get a tryout in the NBA because of Auburn winning, not because he had 15 points at College of Charleston. You know what I mean? So what are your thoughts, though, just overall for Zep and his situation, not necessarily an Auburn situation?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head with that last comment about, teams want to see winners. I mean, I'm not and I think there are a lot of national media guys that know who Zep Jasper is because he came to Auburn and he's playing a crucial role on a championship caliber team. Whereas if he's at College of Charleston and, they're just an average team in their conference, I'm not sure that I wouldn't know who Zep Jasper was. And so I think for him, I mean, as long as your name's out there and people know who you are, the more people that know who you are, the better off, the more successful you can possibly be. And so I think definitely coming to Auburn would be a good decision for him, especially because if he comes back next year and he's going to have an even bigger role next year with Jabari leaving and Walker leaving, I mean, it's only going to, get better and better. And so I think he made the right choice. I think, like I said, just being on a winning team and contributing to a winning team, especially if we win the national championship, will do nothing but give him more recognition.
Yeah, I think that's very telling again on the program that Zep would want to come back. And I think that feeds into a little bit of the Noah Gurley thing at Alabama too, even though he's not going to be able to hang his hat on what kind of impact Zep's had at Auburn. Is Noah Gurley saying he wants to come back to Alabama and play an extra year, a COVID year, whatever. And so I think that surprised some people. And I think that's telling you that these guys get it. They understand their role. I remember when I was a manager at Auburn, we were having a really up and down year, and Alan Payne, I think maybe a sophomore, and he had a couple really good games in a row. And then all of a sudden he wasn't playing like at all, like not a minute. And he was always playing a little bit off the bench, and then all of a sudden none at all. And I remember, being a young guy, and I'm always trying to keep the pulse on all the guys. I was trying to, keep everybody happy and talking to them. And I was talking to Alan Payne about it, and I was figuring he was upset, and I was like, I really think you're doing this, this, and this well. You're going to get a chance, don't worry about it and all that. And I was like, do you know what's going on, why you're not getting to play? And I remember he had met with Barbie. He's like, I know exactly why I'm not getting to play. No big deal. I'm gonna get better and I'm gonna work through it and all that kind of stuff. So I just think all of these guys know their situation a lot better than the average person does. And sometimes we don't feel that way. We think that there's a disconnect there or whatever, just because maybe they pout on the bench or they seem frustrated or something out there. I guarantee they have a much better feel for what's going on and what they need to do to get on the basketball court.
Yeah, for sure. Especially playing with a coach like Bruce Pearl. I mean, he's going to push you to be the best version of yourself. I mean, whether you're a walk on, whether you're a manager, no matter what your role is on the basketball team, he's going to demand that, you give your best efforts and you reach your potential. And so just having that kind of coach, you can't go wrong playing for a coach like that because, at the end of the day, you're going to be better off playing under somebody like Bruce Pearl.
So let's move on to some team stats stuff. And this will be the last major thing we do in this episode. But this is another thing I did with Alabama that I thought was really interesting, because if you go on last year's Alabama team and this year's Alabama team, you would think a lot of the stuff was different. I mean, because everybody just raving over all this stuff they did last year and then them getting blasted on all this stuff they're doing this year. When you actually looked at the team stats, I mean, they were almost identical. Those teams are almost identical. The only massive difference, and it wasn't massive, the only difference was they basically were giving up about 1-3 more per game. They were making about 1-3 less per game. I mean, it was just crazy, the team stats and the differences. And so I wanted to kind of do this with the Auburn point of view. So I want to think about that Final Four team that ended in 2019. I want to think about the 2020 team that was on a good run. I mean, a 25-6 team that, had Isaac Okoro, had Samir Dowdy really playing well, and then skip over the year that didn't exist last year. Talk about the 2022 team. So I sent this to you earlier. You don't have the stats in front of you, but I sent you that idea earlier. Talk to me just kind of briefly about some of the differences you saw in those three teams. Thinking back, what are some things that you think one of those teams may have been better at? So one of these teams may have been worse at. Give me kind of your overview there when you start thinking about it.
So I think what people forget on that 2019 team, the year before 2017, 2018, that team went 13-5 in the SEC. Like they were really good. They went to the NCAA tournament and they won a game and advanced the second round and then got beat. And so they were an experienced group. I mean, Jerry was a junior. You had Bryce as a senior. Chuma Kiki arguably might have been the best, most talented player on that team. He's a sophomore. So they had a lot of experience, and I think that kind of boded well for a lot of that Final Four run. And so that was one of the good things about that team. And then you go to the 20 team, and you got Isaac Okoro, you got Javon McCormick, Samir Dowdy. I think they were kind of more of a defensive team, it felt like. They were hard hat, rebound. I mean, that's always going to be Bruce Pearl team is rebounding, but they're just kind of more, more physical, kind of not as flashy shooting threes as the 2019 team was. And so credit to them, though, just being able to win a different, because they, were 11-7, I think, that year. So credit to them for,
25-6, 12-6 in the league. And that was the year the 2 seed going in the SEC tournament and got shut down.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, that proves that they can win a different type of way than the year before, and so that was a good on that team. And then you get to this team where you got Jabari, you got Walker, you got Wendell, Zepp, all the guys, and it's like I think this team might be overall top to bottom. This might be the most talented team of those three. More depth, can win in a variety of ways. I think this might be the most talented defensive team as well, just because, you got a 6'10" power forward that can guard 1 through 5. And then you got Kessler, who can pretty much guard 1 through 5 just because his length is going to allow him to. And then you got Zepp and you got KD that are both, really good moving their feet. And so just this team's, I guess, more talented as far as the defensive wise. And so that's good to see. But yeah, I mean, all of them, played really hard. A staple of Bruce Pearl team. But I think what concerns me about this year's team, like I said, that team in 2019 was just so experienced. And this team, I'm not sure that we have anybody on the roster that's actually been to the NCAA tournament. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in March, just because there's just everything's so new. And but we'll see. I'm sure. I mean, but like I said, this team's more talented. You got, arguably the number 1 pick in the draft. So that alone should give you an advantage in a lot of areas. So there's a lot to like about all those teams, but each one's kind of a little bit different. The 17 or the 19 team, more of a run and gun, shooting three. I think the The year after that, they were more of like a hard hat team. And then this year, this team can just play in a variety of ways. So it's good to see.
So I was trying to go back and look really quickly. Did North Carolina make the tournament last year? Do you think Walker Kessler played any minutes last year in the tournament?
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah, he might have played a little bit.
Yeah, we'll have to go back, but you're totally right on that because even that group of juniors that we've had has kind of been the core of our backup units. At least the COVID kind of took them out of it last 2 years ago, and then the NCAA last year.
Yeah.
So then let's do it this way, and we don't have to go in super detail each time, but I'm going to give you the stat, and I want you to tell me of those three teams which one you think led the way.
Okay.
Okay, so like for example, we'll start easy. Points per game. 19, 20, or 22, which team do you think had the most points per game?
I'd probably say 19.
That is correct. Very close, though. The 2019 team was at 79.7 points per game. The 2022 team this year was at 79.3, and the 2020 team was at 78. So very, very close. Very close. But 2019 inches it out by a hair.
Okay.
Field goal percentage. What team do you think shot the best from the field overall?
Probably this year's team, if I had to guess, just because a lot of those Walker Kessler dunks and Jabari shooting high percentage shots and Zetas are very missing shots.
I think I might would have guessed that too, but it's the 2019. They shot 45% from the field. This year's 44.4. So I mean, super, super close. Okay. And then 43.3 for 2020.
Okay.
3-point field goal percentage. Who do you think? We know that first team was known for their 3-point shooting, but 3-point field goal percentage, what you got?
Percentage. Man, I think this team shoots a pretty good. Well, here lately we've been kind of struggling. Let's say I'll go to the 2019 team just because
it is. Yeah. You look, that's one of the biggest differences on this thing. 2019 Auburn went 37.7% from the 3-point line. I mean, that's why that team was really good. They made 11.4 threes per game.
Okay.
The 2020 team shot 30.6%. They made 8.1 threes per game. And then so that team won 25 games. A really good team, but they shot 7% less than the 2019 team. And then this year's team shoots 32.3. So kind of in the middle, but closer to the 2020 team than the 2019. And the exact same 8.1 makes per game. So the 2019, the Final Four team made almost 11.5 threes a game. The last two teams we're talking about made almost exactly 8 threes per game. Any surprise there?
Not too much. I'm actually happy that this team shoots better than the 20 team. That's a good sign for success. And I think I'm sure that 2019 team. I mean, if we weren't making threes, I'm not sure that we could have advanced as far as we did. And so I'm not sure that this team has to make 11 threes to advance in March, because it's just because the defense is so much better, or not, I won't say so much better, but I think the defense is better. And I think that we're just more balanced in other areas as far as maybe like, 2-point field goals or defense, scoring in transition. So I think, if we can make 8 threes, I think that's going to give us a very good shot to advance in March. So that's good.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to look at it. Let's jump to the free throw percentage. I kind of that's something that just bounces around every year. It's kind of, why is the team a good free throw shooting team? Why are they not? If you had to guess, just thinking back on those years, which team do you think is the best free throw percentage team?
Let's just say I'd probably go to 2019 again. Jared, Bryce.
It's this year, 2022. And I'm not shocked about that. I feel like we shot the free throw pretty well. 73.6% this year. 2019 team was at 71.1. The 2020 team was at 67.4. And that was with Samir Dowdy shooting like 90% from the line and shooting most of. Remember how good he was from the line? I think Austin Wiley has a lot to do with that. I think Horace wasn't on that team, so I guess Wiley definitely gets some blame there. But if you go by free throw makes a game, that 2020 team had 17.8 makes. They were the most. They went to the line and made it the most. This year's team's at 14.8, and 2019 Final Four team was at 13.5. So, style of play, that's not super surprising to me, not shooting as many jump shots on those last two teams.
Yeah, I think that 20 team kind of had to do that type of basketball, and they're more physical and hard nosed type. So that makes sense to me.
Moving on to rebounding, just total rebounds per game. Which of the three would you think leads the way?
Either 19 or 20, if I had to guess. I'll go with who was the power forward on the who's power forward on the 20 team?
Danjel Purefoy, I believe.
Yeah, I love you, Dan. Not much of a rebounder. I guess
Jalen backed him up, and I think Danjel was the guy there.
um let's go with 2019 just because I think Chuma and Austin, two better rebounders than maybe the two on these.
Listen to these numbers. It's 2020, 40.8 rebounds a game in 2020. This year's team is at 39.8, so one less. The 2019 team, 34.2 rebounds per game.
Wow.
They actually are minus 1.1 compared to their opponents. They got out rebounded on average. The 2020 team out rebounded their opponents by 5.6 a game. And this year we're averaging 3.4 more rebounds per game than our opponents.
Man, that's super surprising. Just because when the Dangel's freshman, well, I guess he was suspended his freshman year?
Mm-hmm.
Or okay,
well, he was suspended his sophomore year. He sat out academically his first year.
Okay, I just remember whenever he first started playing a lot, he was a power forward, and we were getting crushed on the boards. And so, if he was a starting power forward on the 2020 team, I guess that shows a lot about his development as a player and getting better and getting more physical. So that's a testament to him. That's very surprising, though.
And Austin Wiley.
Yeah.
I think people underestimate some of the impact he had on those teams. Austin Wiley had a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think
Isaac Okoro was a really good rebounder at the guard position too.
Yeah. I kind of, if there was a con to Walker's game, I kind of wish he was kind of more fit. Austin's thicker and got a little bit more size than Walker, but I do think as far as a mindset and grittiness, I think Austin might have a little bit more of that than Walker does, and that kind of helps with the rebounding. And so, no, that's cool. I wouldn't have guessed that at all.
Let's move to assists per game. Which of the three do you think had more assists, more made baskets off passes than any of the others?
I think 19, maybe, just because.
This year, it's close. Really? 14.7 this year. In 19, it was 14.3, so really close, and a little bit down, 12.8 in 2020, because it was just Samir and Javon going to get their own buckets all the time, and Isaac too, really. That's not a surprise. Let's move to turnovers. Any of them stand out to you? You think turn the basketball over more than the other two?
This team seems to turn the ball over a little bit more than I would like, in my opinion. The best turnover margin, I would probably go, let's say the 20 team.
It was Jared Harper in that 2019 team, 11.7 turnovers a game. And I feel like that's the team that's played the fastest probably of all of them too. But 11.7 a game. This year we're at 12.2, and 2020 we were at 12.9. So not a huge impact there, but it tells you a little bit about the guard play on that Final Four team. About steals, let's go to defense a little bit. Steals, which of those three teams do you think produced the most steals?
Which team produced the most steals? That 2019, they got after it on that team, and 2020 did too. Let's go 2019.
Yeah, and it is 2019, and this is where we're going to see a little bit more of a gap between this year and that team compared to 2020. Back in 2019, we were at 9.2 steals a game. Right now, we're at 8.8. That middle year in 2020, we're at 6.4. So definitely that's the first kind of a little bit of an impact we've seen in this thing. And then the three-point shooting, of course. Yeah. Let's move over to blocks. You would think this was pretty obvious. Any reason why you don't think Walker Kessler in this year is the most blocks that we've had?
No. Austin Wiley's on both of those teams, right?
Right.
That'd be the only reason why not, but I would say this year for sure, right?
Yeah, it's this year. 7.9 blocks a game right now. 4.8 and 4.9 on the other 2 years. So that was Austin Wiley. Anthony and Horace got a few in 2019. So I would have thought they were a tiny bit higher. And Chuma would get one every now and then. So 4.8, 4.9 are decent numbers. That's not a lead the league number or anything. Those are decent numbers, but that tells you how good this year's team is at that. This is kind of a funny stat I want to put in. Attendance. So attendance, we'll just go ahead and say this. The 2019 teams, the average home attendance at Auburn games, 8,156. 2020, it went up by 700, so it's 8,866. And then this year, we've sold out every single home game, 9,121. Not a ticket to be had. Before we jump into, I only have 4 defensive stats, but before we get in there, you've been in the arena a lot this year. Both of us have. Talk to me about the atmosphere. And has there been any other kind of jump in it, or is this kind of just going along the same as the last few years?
I would say like the big games are always going to be super energetic and fun and loud, but I think just the average game, like against who we play at home, like a Mississippi State, we play them on the road this year, but just kind of along somebody like that, just the average team. Even those games are super loud, super fun. So it's been.
Yeah, how about Texas A&M on a Wednesday night? I think the second to last week of the season. I was there. It was packed. It was sold out. It was rowdy. I mean, it was the same atmosphere. I mean, it wasn't the Alabama and Kentucky game, but it was. I mean, if I was going just somewhere for the first time, I wouldn't have been disappointed in that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. And so the jungle's been fired up each game. So it's been great to see. You got camping out, all year long. I'm not sure if there was any camping out on that 2019-20 team. So that just shows you just how much, more involved we're getting with the fans, just how much more engaging it is. And so it's good to see.
Let's move to the defensive stats real quick. Opponents' points per game. Which of the 3 teams do you think are giving up the least amount of points?
Giving up the least amount of points. Maybe that 20 team. That's what I'll go with.
This year, 67 points per game. The 2020 team was giving up 70.4, and the 2019 was 68.8. Opponent's field goal percentage. Any reason why this year wouldn't go along with that?
I would guess this year if that was the case for the last one.
38.3%. That's pretty good. Holding teams under 40. 2020 it was 41.3, and 2019 was 43.7. So a little bit higher there. Opponent's 3-point field goal percentage. I'll just go ahead and run through these. This year again, 30.8. 2020 it was 32.5, and 2019 it was 34.5. And then this one I want you to get the guessing again right here. Kind of goes along with the steals, but opponents' turnovers. What team do you think was the best at getting the turnovers for the other team?
I'd have to guess that 2019 team. So I think they really got after it on the defensive side.
It is 17.1.
Yeah, like I feel like they get the recognition for making the threes, Bryce Brown, Jared Harper, but on the defensive side of the ball, man, they were just pests and like
active, Chuma and Anthony and Horace.
There was just the opponents didn't have room to breathe, even off ball defense. I mean, we were face guarding. I mean, that team and just because Bryce Brown is such a really good defender, such quick feet, and so I think he kind of set the tone for everything. And so that team, man, they're really impressive defensively. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
Samir and Malik were good. To kind of just bounce them off those really good defenders was really, really good. So if you add up all those, that was my list, and you add up to kind of compare which teams are doing more. The 2022 team is leading, if you take out attendance, is leading in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. The 2019 team leads in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. And the 2020 team only led in 1. Rebounding was the only thing they were better at than those other 2. Defense, almost all the defensive stats are going with this year's team. Almost all the shooting stats are going with the 2019 team. But overall, they're pretty dang close, even though I feel like these are way different style teams. When you really dig into the numbers, it's not that much different on either team.
Yeah, that's impressive. That actually gives me more confidence, going into March about what this team can do. Did you say that this team turns the ball over less than the 2019 team did?
This team turns the ball over 12.2 times per game. 2019 was 11.7. So they were half a turnover a game better than this year's team is.
Okay. And then rebounding, you said, was this year?
Rebounding this year's much better. 5 rebounds a game more than that 2019 team.
Okay, that's impressive. I would think that kind of maybe offsets the 3-point shooting that maybe that 2019 had the edge over. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts, winning going down the stretch.
So that's kind of my final thing, and then we'll get you out of here. Any thoughts on just moving forward, some things that you'd like to see this Auburn team do to have success, and maybe a couple areas that you're a little worried about this Auburn team in March?
Yeah, so I think just because we're so good defensively, that's going to allow us to compete in just about any game. It's going to be the other things like, limiting turnovers and playmaking and, shots. And how are we going to, when the pressure, in the last few minutes of, because in March, the games are going to be close. It's like, how are we going to, first of all, what rotation are we going to have out there? Who's going to close the games for us? So there's a lot of
The little
uncertainty.
guys. I want the little guy
Hey,
rotation.
I hope so, but I was hoping to see that last game. I didn't see that lineup at all last game, so kind of
No, he put it in with like 40 seconds left. Technically, we closed the game before he
really.
subbed. It was crazy because I was looking for it, and it was less than a minute left. And he put the guard lineup in there. And then like 30 seconds later, he checked in Preston and whoever.
That's funny. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. That's what I'm looking forward to. Like, I think shot making is going to be a big thing. Can we stay hot? I do think the fact that Jabari seems to be playing his best ball right now, that's encouraging. He'll turn it up, in March. And I think Bruce Pearl made a comment in his last press conference saying that this time of the year, you see what you're really made of, and the cream kind of rises to the top. And so that should be good. But yeah, just kind of limiting turnovers, making shots, rebounding, those basic things, and just how we handle the pressure. Can we stay poised under pressure? Are we going to figure it out? Like who's going to take the last shot? Those small things. We'll see how it goes, but I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Hey, I'm right there with you. I sure did trust Jared Harper with the basketball late. He would usually make a play for good or bad. He would make that play. But I'm right there with you. I'm excited about it. I just can't wait for it to get going. I can't wait for this SEC tournament. I think it's going to be a really fun. This SEC tournament could go a lot of different ways. So you're headed to Tampa, right?
Yeah, excited. We leave out Friday morning, so we'll be there cheering on the orange and blue. Hopefully, we'll be able to come back, in their championship. That's the goal. So yeah, I'm
How
excited.
crazy is it that the last time Auburn played an SEC tournament game is when you and I were in Nashville sneaking in to watch the end of that Knox or that Tennessee Auburn game? That feels like a long time ago.
It seems like forever ago. But yeah, we were there in Nashville last time we played, and we were fortunate enough to win that one. So hopefully, I'll be the good luck charm and bringing that good luck to Tampa, and we can do it again. So I'm
Well, let's
excited.
keep it rolling. Well, I appreciate you joining me tonight, TJ, and hopefully Sunday we're gonna all get together. So if you want to jump on with us, you can to kind of recap the tournament a little bit and start getting ready for selection Sunday. I appreciate you. I've been keeping up with all your stuff on social and everything, and I hope you guys safe journeys down to Tampa and y'all have a good time.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Pleasure to be on anytime. Love talking Auburn basketball, and like I said, good luck to the Tigers this weekend. Let's come back with another championship.
War Eagle.
War Eagle.